Welcome to the Small Business Breakthrough Podcast, where every week we're interviewing small business owners that have built small businesses themselves and support the small business community. But today we bring on somebody who has a very unique history. She is actually former Intel, worked for Intel. Has done pro athlete and has built a global consulting agency helping build leaderships development and doing fractional services, which is a very interesting suite, but her history is one that we want to learn more about. I want to welcome Michelle Sullivan from Sullivan Global Consulting to the show, and she's the co-founder. We want to learn more about Michelle. Michelle, welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
Tell us a little bit about what is Sullivan Global Consulting and how you serve your clients.
Yes, so Sullivan Global Consulting, as you mentioned, the primary focus is executive coaching, leadership development, mostly programs that are woven into the executive coaching often, and fractional C-suite consulting coming in, be it like a VP level, COO, CIO, different ones because I played those hats in the past. So depending on what the business needs are, I jump in and I help usually run the strategy aspect of that and or advising.
So you worked for Intel for a while, and then
Yes.
you ran some global operations, and then you were able to go remote. As I was reading through some of your history, but then you made this like pivot into pro athleticism. Talk to us a little bit about what was that like, and to go from a corporate world into pro athlete.
Actually, I was managing both at the same time. And I will say that about Intel, they were wonderful about supporting that. And they said, hey, you do your work, we don't even know. So we support this. But it was a pivot in balancing both. And I took a lot of my history of being in science and technology into this world of more extreme sports, which is male dominated as well. And I think a lot of it is just having the courage to do that and make that jump and the focus to take risks. Believe me, I've paid for that physically. Um, but I think that's translated into the work that I do with my clients and being able to just continue to persevere through business, having them think about here, be courageous and moments when you feel like maybe the world's against you or can you continue through whatever it is these people are dealing with, because a lot is very high pressure. So I bring a lot of that, of what I went through in the competitive level, into the work that I do with my clients. Granted, they're not all athletes, of course, but it's a mindset. And so I given the corporate background as well, it was very, very demanding across time zones, across cultures, late night, early morning meetings, things like that. So you learn a lot around cultural intelligence, emotional intelligence, and just being able to communicate and appreciate the differences that people bring to the table that makes your teams and your business unique and actually more successful. And I translate that into the work that I do with my clients, especially as they're trying to build their businesses and their teams.
Yeah, so as you're talking about that, as the building their businesses, building the teams, what was that turning point in your history where you decided it was time to go and do this on your own and start helping other businesses grow their businesses and build teams and develop?
So I had a few starts, and some of that, as you know, with the work you do, you sometimes get pulled into working for the company, and I did do that a few times. However, based on my past experiences working with teams and becoming a manager at 27 years old, and leading people who were my father's age at that time. However, those folks came to me later in life and said, hey, we're going to start a company. For example, there was one, brilliant people, and early stages of what we are calling AI now. but more at the ERP level. And they're like, we have the technical knowledge, but can you help us? And we want to go enter into different markets outside of the US, grow our markets we already have in Europe. Here these are like PhD people, and then we also need to learn how to work better together. We have German and Brazilian and these people who are very different, very different in how they work and communicate and how to appreciate that. And that's what I said to them. I'm like, first and foremost, before I can work through all your strategy and start going out there, you need to learn how to work together well with each other and appreciate your differences. So that's where I started. So really, that's the first story. And they did, was people coming to me who I'd worked with. Those people had worked for me in the past. I was their manager, and people who I had actually worked for. So I'm like, I'm onto something here. I'm enjoying this. And at the same time, I decided to go to business school. And it was an internationally focused program, and it also had a component of a double major of leadership. So I started working with them, and then I did a couple other small consulting things, like with Nike and Direct TV, and was pretty important strategic work. And then I got pulled into corporate again, and I became a COO working for an organization. But during all of that, I realized, okay, people are still asking me to do this work, and it morphed a lot more into the coaching aspect. And so then I went and did a ICF accredited program. And this was in 2012 when I was actually at Kaiser and on their leadership team. And my manager encouraged it. So I've been pretty lucky along the way to have managers who encourage these things. But then at that point, I said, you know what? It's time to pivot back and just solely focus on Sullivan Global. And so through that, more and more, I had companies asking me to do more of the executive coaching and the leadership development. And I went through a lot of these programs and certifications and partnerships with a lot of the companies people know around emotional intelligence and DISC and team stuff and whatnot. And it started to become more of that. And that was pretty much in 2013 where I made that full jump. Yep, 12 years ago.
So listeners, there's a connection here that I want to bring into light is Michelle's spent a lot of time in corporate. She's worked with Intel, she's worked with Kaiser Permanente, she's worked with Nike, she's worked with some of these very, very large corporations across the country. But the element of it is that her manager or her leader has encouraged her to do other things. And while she decided to go on and do her own business, the development that they got from her during the time that she was at these businesses was very valuable to the organization. So if you're a leader listening to this and you're have people working for you, and this even comes from a conference I was recently at and my own businesses in the past, pouring into your people and pushing them to grow will help your business grow, even if that means that they leave down the road. That should be one of the most encouraging things is you would rather train them and have them stay and help you grow. But if you don't train them and they stay, then you have an untrained employee working for you. Hey, real quick, did you know that most small businesses don't actually achieve their breakthrough? And it's not because you don't care. It's all because you're trying to do it alone. That's why I created the Momentum Community, is to help you change that. I want to see you achieve the breakthrough that you've been waiting for. It's where we committed entrepreneurs come and get focused, get accountable, and finally build a business and life that you are meant for. If you want to learn more, click the link in the description below and enjoy the rest of the episode. So, Michelle, it has been fantastic. I wanted to create that little bit of a connection there, as listeners are wondering, well, why are we have this person that's worked for corporate so long on, and it's a great opportunity to know how great companies, because I think all three of those companies that you've listed have really good histories of development, and that they push their team to continue to work forward. Talk to us a little bit about how have you taken that and turned that into success in your own business?
Yes, so connecting that further, the example I gave was okay, maybe I was working for a larger company or a professional services organization. Some of these people have next acts too, right? So that's why when you work together and you focus on lifting each other up, we all go somewhere else at some point, usually. And so they may start their own business, given the example of that I kicked off with. And so I take some of the professionalism and processes from some of these larger organizations into, well, as you start a business, there's a lot of things people don't think of, right? And so going back to, aside from the executive coaching and leadership development, there's startups. And I don't just say a tech startup. I've done a lot with tech startups. And it's not romantic. It's hard work. And that's one of the things when I'm working with small businesses or these startups in the tech industry, particularly, I do a lot of work with, because they're bootstrapped. To be like, it's a lot of work if you're coming from a larger company or maybe even a medium sized company where you have resources that are at your disposal. And to help them really think through some of this, even as they're going through like their readiness. Are you truly ready for this? How long can you go before you make money? Who can you tap into within your network and help you as you're bootstrapped, right? All these strategic things, but is this for you? And if it is, it's going to take some time and that perseverance to as you're going through that. And so setting up a lot of these systems upfront of the things you're going to need, all the little things, accounting, legal, this and that, versus, don't combine your personal with your business bank, all these basic things surprises me how people aren't aware of all of the little things that it takes to start the business and then run it. And so focusing on let's be very intentional as you're getting going is going to help you so much once you really get going and you're trying to serve your clients, right? Because you're like, I'm trying to serve my clients, I'm trying to grow the business, I'm trying to run the business, right? This. And so that a lot of what I learned in these, I call mature environments, to really help set the foundation for people as they're starting up and then as they grow and scale. Because that's one of the biggest challenges I see is like, well, how do we scale in a way that makes sense with where we are today and then as we grow? So that's a big thing that I bring, thinking about from a small business perspective, and especially a lot of the technology startups that I work with.
Yeah, there's really 4 levels is what I've kind of figured out for the business owner as they're gonna go through, and the business stages as, they're going, and it's stuff that I'm working on developing some content around, but you have your beginners, right? Your early stage people that they don't know what they don't know, and, like, they're combining, a that personal and that business account, and they're not keeping track of things, and they're sold, maybe they're a solopreneur, maybe they have a couple of temp workers that work for them, and then you kind of move into this amateur stage where it's they started to get a little bit of the stuff, but they've starting to create separating the accounts, and they're starting to work with others, and they're maybe starting to, but you don't really make that step from amateur to professional until you start to get some outside help that is helping you with it, and that's where bringing in leadership development consultants such as Michelle can really start to level up When you have that professional stage is when things really get interesting and you can focus heavy on the client and the development because you're not worried about that as those backgrounds. What would you say is a recent um, project or initiative that has really sparked um, the continuation of what you want to do in your business?
So I have had one client for 5 years, and they were part of a larger company, and they spun off into a technology startup in this AI and chip space. And I just to see working with the CEO himself, who was a CTO, right? He has over like 300 patents. And how do I transition from this? And this is not a big company. When they started, as a handful of people. Um, and how do I transition from being a technical person to a CEO? Right? It's a completely different mindset. And he's like, I want you to help me become that person. I've seen the work that you've done with other people, people who have never had any sort of coaching, because in especially in technology and finance, who I work with as well. Well, they're techie. They don't need the people skills. And I'm like, absolutely the opposite. You're on a team, right? You're responsible for yes, you need to communicate. Yes, you need to work with others who are different. Yes, you need to make decisions. Yes. Okay. So, and that was in 2018, actually. So it's quite a while ago. And just to see that company grow from working with him and then saying, well, I want you to work with my executive team, right? So with a few people, that's going great. But he's already a great leader because he doesn't need it. Like, just imagine where he could go, right? All right. Yes, I'm willing to take, let's try it. And then in that person, I mean, he just flourished even more from where he was when people thought, well, he's good. He doesn't need this. And then it went down another level. And then it's like, well, what about some of the engineers and technical folks? Again, that's where I love to work with people before they're there. That's the other space. Is a lot of times people wait until, well, now they have management or responsibilities. So now let's get them some coaching and leadership development, get them into some program. I'm like, no, you need everyone leads no matter where they are in the organization at some point. So, and I've been working with them for quite some time, and between the coaching and then coaching between the different teams in the US and abroad even. And and then there's conflict as part of, not really it's just more around different styles and how do we work together. And to see some people who were at one point, I'm going to leave because of X person, we cannot get along, to now I have X person's back. And just seeing those things, like, no, appreciate those differences. And so when you're working with all these different people, you have to hold that confidence. Of course, those questions to ask or ways to maybe motivate them when working with others. And then they were recently acquired by Amazon. And so I'm proud of that they worked very hard throughout all these years, and that was one of their goals, was an acquisition, so people in the company could you know um, reap the benefits of all their hard work through that. And so that was very recent. That was just official in December. So
Wow, so that's quite the accomplishment to be able to work through, and it shows that importance again. And the theme of this episode is that pouring into people and developing your people further down the chain, as you said, even to you went from executive level leadership to manager level leadership to down to front, quote unquote front line,
mhm,
the that is continuing to develop the team, and the importance of really pouring into continuing education and continuing development of people inside of the organization. And that can turn into what, and this is goes true. It's really hard for a small business owner that that maybe has 5 people right now, and they just don't see that as the picture. But pouring into those people and really developing, 1, it creates longevity. 2, it's just that sense of accomplishment, and you've just no idea where that's gonna take the business, down the road, because it could turn into an acquisition that later in life serves you well for retirement or serves well for others that go. The coaching, consulting, and leadership development space is one of those that there's been a lot of people that have jumped in, and they're varying backgrounds. But what I want to talk about is, what's the future look like? I haven't gone. You've talked a little bit about a company based AI stuff that you've dove into, but how is the development of others going to change in the next 3 to 5 years?
So I am in a program at MIT right now, and one of the the courses was AI for business and the implications on business. And I did a project. Well, how would this actually impact my business and this community? So I'm going to weave that in a moment because a lot of people have jumped into this, and so there is the sense of saturation and legitimacy. And the reason people hire me and what I'm seeing as a trend is two things. One is you need to have been an operator, right? Not just I decided I want to be a coach. I was a life coach or whatever it was. I've never led people or ran a team or division or anything. It's in theory. So I'm seeing more people who are really needing to be intentional on where they're spending their money right now with this climate. It's very volatile at this exact moment from day to day. So particularly in technology, and I work a lot with healthcare as well, is okay, if we're going to spend this money, we want someone who at least can understand our world to some degree, has been in our shoes at some point in their life. And so I'm not influencing decisions because coaching does not do that, but I know the questions to ask, I know the language to speak, I understand the pressures. So I'm seeing more of them saying, wanting people like the Jasons of the world too to say, hey, you get it, and I trust you just with that. And also, did you go to an some sort of accredited program, right? And things that are recognized, of course, International Coaching Federation is one of them. So a bit of that, if you're hired usually from the C-suite, they care less about that. They want to see, what have you done in the past? Give me your referrals. And a lot of them come through referrals. If you're going through more of the HR organization, they look for a bit of both. It depends on the size of the company. If it's a smaller company, then they're even more about, well, I really need to be careful about how I'm spending my money. So, yes, you wear that hat, but I need to be careful of between going into consultant and coaching mode. And I will share the difference. So, I see a bit of that. But then it's like, well, how can I bring AI in to help you? Like, if you're high up in the chain, you're not going to want to be talking to some AI bot. However, you know, it's lonely up top for people, and they need people they can really trust and have that sounding board. But it could be other things, like as they're kind of working through their productivity and this and that, they have some sort of technology that can help keep them on track or check in with them. Maybe bring in some type of leadership development things that are a little bit more automated, and or they can run through to give them feedback. But at the highest level, and even when people are, they're starting and their business is growing, um, they're really looking for someone who I think they feel is like their partner. This is based on my experience and also people who are in this space who I work with, um, who have similar type of clientele is what they're seeing. But there's more scrutiny for sure on legitimacy.
Okay. Um, the futures of the industry are, um, just gonna continue on running through, and we're gonna be able to progress, further. What is Um, what is that one thing that differentiates you from the others in this space?
I this is one of my slogans I say. I help people see the possible in what may seem impossible, right? I am your cheerleader as your coach for sure, but if I'm making you feel good and sugarcoat everything, I'm not doing my job. My job is to help you move the needle in a way that serves you, right? Not me or anybody else. And if I'm not doing that, I'm not doing my job. And sometimes those conversations are tough for people, and sometimes it's almost like a breakdown before a breakthrough. But I really encourage, and I'm not going to use the word push because I know the boundaries, people to see what's possible. And I think that's unique because I've seen many other people, or the feedback I get is, well, my coach didn't push me like you did, in a way that was encouraging, to have the courage, to have the perseverance. And that's how I work. So I'm like, if you're coming here to have a kumbaya, I'm not the person for you. When we move the needle, we can do that. And we have those successes along the way.
There's a time to celebrate, but there's a substantial amount of time to put in the effort and put in the work before you get to have the celebrations. Totally makes sense in there. All right, Michelle, it has been such a great conversation. Are you ready to jump into our lightning round?
Yes.
All right. Uh, quick hitting questions. First one, coffee or tea?
Coffee. I roast my own coffee, as a matter of fact.
Oh, wow. We have not had that yet. That's amazing. So, I've something I probably will never be allowed to get into. My wife actually hates the smell. I love coffee myself, but and different flavors, but getting into roasting would be, I'll have to find a different property to use. How about cats or dogs?
Both, but I only have a dog right now, puppy.
Okay. If you could grab only one weapon or item during a zombie apocalypse, what would it be?
Berkline water. Unlimited supply, though. Water.
No, there you go. Favorite quote or phrase that you think about often?
I honestly think it's pretty much what I said is, remember to see the possible in what may seem impossible.
About a book that has influenced your life the most?
The most. Ooh. Um, I would say a book that there's so many. Okay. A recent one that I read is called Desert Solitude. And it's not a business book, but it's just about a coming to life one about someone who kind of spends a lot of time in the desert when they were starting their career back in the 70s. And it's just about having a lot of introspection and reflection and appreciation for just everything around you in the busy world.
Okay. How about the biggest obstacle that you have had to overcome and one lesson that you've learned from it?
Not having a mother around very much when I was growing up, and I was raised by my father. But that actually became probably one of the best things that could have happened to me because and my Polish grandparents, and I just learned so much from them about family and growing up on a farm and all of that. So it wasn't a traditional upbringing, but I think a lot of the courage that I have today and believing in myself and that it's going to be me and not somebody else for me to get to whatever it is I need to do came from came from that, and them growing up in the depression and whatnot. So it wasn't easy, but I took so much from that and appreciate that so much as an adult.
Excellent. That's a very good one on that. And on that note, what is the best way that our listeners could get a hold of you if they would like to collaborate with you or learn more about Sullivan Global Consulting?
Yes, I'm on LinkedIn. It's actually Michelle Dombrowski Sullivan on LinkedIn. That's my maiden name, and so changing it would have been hard. So it's Michelle Dombrowski Sullivan on LinkedIn and also my website. It's sullivanglobal.net. So the .net is important.
Yes, and we will have all of that information located in the show notes or the description if you are watching this on YouTube. And go back and listen through some of the tidbits about the really the biggest importance in this conversation that I want you to take care of listeners is that pouring into your people, it seems expensive to get your people to train and you're afraid that they're going to leave. But trust me, I've had many of the people that have I've poured into, spent money on, that have spent time to say thank you. They have stayed with the company and they've continued to grow and flourish because of that. And that they will help you and your customers flourish if you spend some time and let them pour into them and allow them to go get these trainings and do some of these extra activities that they're interested in doing when you're able to support them, even if it's during work hours. If you enjoyed this episode and you would like to hear more episodes, check out the playlist located right here. And until next time.